Welcome, dear dreamers, to Whispers of the Night tonight. We step together into a quiet world of soft shadows, gentle moonlight, and a music box that has waited patiently through time. Before we begin, take a slow, deep breath. Feel the weight of your day gently lift from your shoulders. Let calmness flow through you. Make yourself comfortable. Adjust your pillows. Wrap yourself in a warm blanket and allow your body to sink slowly into the stillness around you. This is your time, a peaceful space where only soft whispers, warm light, and gentle melodies exist. Tonight, the music box waits, carrying stories of laughter, moonlight, and moments long past. Each note will guide you gently, drawing you closer to quiet dreams. If you haven't already, please subscribe to Whispers of the Night and tap the bell so you can return to these stories whenever you need a soothing escape. Let the soft glow, the calm air, and the melody wrap around you. Notice the gentle rhythm of your breathing, slow, steady, relaxing. Close your eyes for a moment if you like, feeling yourself floating softly with each note. The attic, the moonlight, the music box, they are all here waiting for you. Tonight, a journey begins, a journey of calm, of gentle memories, and the quiet song of a music box that has waited for you. The music box begins to hum, soft notes drifting like silver threads through the air. You feel the warmth of the melody wrap gently around you. Memories, long forgotten, awaken laughter, whispers, moonlight through the trees each note carries. You higher, through mist, up glowing staircases, until you float in a world made of starlight. Breathe slowly. Feel every sigh of the wind, every shimmer of light, every gentle pulse of the song. The music flows through the attic, through your room, through your dreams. Drift with it. Let it cradle your mind. Nothing exists beyond this soft glow. You are safe. You are calm. The melody will carry you through the night, where moonlight and memory meet. The music box that waited. The forgotten tune. In a small attic filled with dust and moonlight, an old music box sat quietly upon a crooked wooden shelf, silent, waiting. The air was heavy with the scent of time, old paper, cedar wood, and a faint trace of lavender that had somehow lingered through the years. Motes of dust danced slowly in the pale beam of light, slipping through the half-open attic window. The whole room seemed to breathe in rhythm with the night, the sigh of old rafters, the gentle creak of the floorboards, the whisper of wind threading through the eaves. The music box had once been a treasure. Its body was carved from cherry wood, its edges rounded smooth by years of careful hands. The lid bore a tiny painted garden, a girl in a blue dress beneath a flowering tree, holding a book and smiling toward something unseen. The paint had faded with age, but even now the faint pastel colors glowed softly when the moonlight touched them. Inside, beneath the delicate brass key, lay a winding mechanism that had not turned in many, many years long ago. Every night before sleep, a little girl had wound it gently until the tune filled her room, a lullaby that shimmered like moonlight through glass. Its melody had followed her dreams, gentle and certain, while the stars turned quietly above her window. The box had once belonged to her grandmother, and before that, to her grandmother's mother, carrying stories from one hand to another. But the years had passed. The little girl had grown, the house had emptied, and the attic had fallen silent. Tonight, however, something shifted outside. The wind whispered through the old apple trees that stood behind the house. One of the branches brushed against the attic window, tapping softly once, twice, as if asking to be let in. The window shuddered open a little wider, and a streak of moonlight spilled across the shelf. The beam touched the music box as gently as a fingertip. Somewhere deep inside the box, the tiny gears gave a reluctant tremor, a click like the sound of a sigh, and then, faintly at first, a single note chimed, fragile, uncertain, followed by another and another. The melody rose hesitantly, as though remembering itself after a very long sleep. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The sound drifted through the attic like a breath, weaving through the cobwebs and corners, stirring the sleeping dust into a soft dance. It was the same lullaby the girl had once loved, a song that had carried warmth and belonging. Each note shimmered in the cold night air, and with it came something invisible, a flicker of memory returning to the room. A toy bear slumped beside a stack of books, its button eyes reflecting silver light. The pages of a storybook fluttered open, stirred by the music, as if the characters inside were waking from their own dreams. A cracked mirror in the corner caught a faint reflection, the shimmer of light, the outline of something that wasn't there before. If anyone had stood there that night, they might have sworn they saw a small figure, a girl made of moonlight and memory, sitting cross-legged before the shelf. Listening, the attic seemed to remember her. The wooden floor beneath her would have creaked in the same way it used to when she played. The rafters would have whispered the same low tune of the house settling into the cold. But she wasn't really there, not as she had been. Only a trace of her lingered, drawn back by the sound of the music box that had waited for her all these years. The melody played on, unhurried and patient, as though it had all the time in the world. Each note carried a memory. There was the scent of her mother's tea brewing downstairs, the faint echo of her father's laughter drifting up through the walls, the warmth of summer evenings when the window had been open and the sound of cicadas filled the air. She would sit cross-legged on the wooden floor, the music box beside her, her small fingers tracing the painted lid, following the outline of the tree and the little figure beneath it. In those days, she had believed that if she wound the box carefully enough and closed her eyes while it played, she could step into the painted garden on the lid, a secret world where time didn't move and flowers never faded. She had believed it so deeply that once, when she was very small, she had whispered goodnight to the girl in blue before turning off the lamp. But time, as it does, had carried her away. The girl grew taller. Her room changed, and the music box was gently placed into a box with her old toys, then moved to the attic. Life below the attic went on: birthdays, departures, homecomings, and finally silence. The walls of the house learned the sound of quiet. Tonight, though, the attic breathed again. The melody, still delicate but steady now, wound its way into the corners of the room. The toys seemed less forgotten. The books no longer looked abandoned. Even the cracked window pane glimmered faintly, catching the rhythm as if remembering laughter that had once filled the house. And in the hush that followed each refrain, something strange yet peaceful lingered, the feeling that the attic itself was listening outside. The moon hung low and luminous. A moth drifted in through the open window, circling the beam of light. It landed briefly on the lid, wings quivering in time with the melody, then rose again and disappeared into the night. The air was cool, and the scent of apple blossoms drifted faintly from the trees below. The house stood in the middle of a small, forgotten town, its garden overgrown, its path lost beneath grass. Yet within these walls, for the first time in years, something was alive again. The music slowed, the tune beginning its gentle descent toward silence. The final notes trembled, lingering in the air like the last ripples in a pond. But just before the sound faded completely, there was another sound. Footsteps. They were soft and hesitant, moving up the narrow staircase. The wooden steps sighed under the weight. A faint beam of light appeared under the attic door, followed by the slow turn of a handle. The door creaked open, and a woman stepped into the attic, carrying a small lantern. She was in her her ash-brown hair falling loose around her shoulders, her gray-green eyes reflecting the faint light. Her cardigan was ocean blue, her dress cream-colored, soft shades that seemed to belong perfectly to the moonlit quiet. In one hand, she held a small notebook. In the other, the lantern, whose glow mingled with the silver light of the moon. Her gaze swept across the room. Everything was as she remembered: the trunks, the books, the toys. And then she saw it, the music box, its lid still trembling faintly from the last note. She froze, her breath caught in her throat, and for a moment she could not move. That melody, she had heard it before, not in years, but somewhere deep within her heart, it still lived. She set the lantern down and crossed the room slowly, each step stirring a faint echo of the past. Her fingers brushed against the box. The wood was cold and smooth beneath the dust. She traced the painted lid, the girl beneath the flowering tree. The colors were faded, but the memory behind them wasn't. With trembling hands, she lifted the lid. The faint scent of lavender rose up, and the tiny brass mechanism inside glimmered weakly in the lantern's light. She whispered, though there was no one to answer. The box was old. The key had long since rusted. There was no reason for it to have played at all. But she didn't question further. Instead, she smiled, a small, wistful smile that trembled at the edges. She sat down on the floor, cross-legged like she used to, and let the silence settle around her. The house was still. The night was deep. And though the melody had ended, its warmth lingered, wrapping around her like a familiar blanket. She reached into her cardigan pocket and drew out a small silver pocket watch. It was another relic from the past, her father's, worn and scratched, its ticking faint but steady. She placed it beside the music box, listening to the two rhythms merge, the steady tick of time and the echo of the tune that had once stopped it. As she sat there, the attic around her seemed to soften. The shadows felt less empty, the silence less cold. She imagined the years folding quietly upon themselves, all the moments she had forgotten, returning like old friends. The sound of her mother humming in the kitchen, the warmth of the fire downstairs, the creak of the stairs at bedtime. Every detail rose again from the dust, alive in her memory. Tears welled in her eyes, not from sorrow, but from the quiet beauty of remembering. After a long while, she wound the small brass key, slowly and carefully. It resisted at first, then yielded with a faint click. She released it, and once again, the music began to play. The melody filled the attic, brighter now, as if the box had been waiting only for her touch. This time, she hummed along softly, uncertainly, until her voice blended with the tune. The notes wrapped around her like moonlight, and for a moment, it felt as though the years between then and now had never existed at all. She could almost see herself as a child again, sitting in this very spot, dreaming of stepping into the painted garden. She closed her eyes, and for a heartbeat, she was there. The tree from the lid stood before her, blossoms fluttering in a soft breeze. The air smelled of spring and sunlight. The girl in the blue dress turned and smiled, not a stranger, but a memory of herself, younger and unafraid. The song ended. When she opened her eyes, the attic was still again. The moon had shifted. Its light now rested gently on her face. She smiled once more, her fingers resting lightly on the lid of the music box. "Thank you," she whispered, not sure whether she spoke to the box, the house, or the memory itself downstairs. The old clock struck 3. The sound echoed faintly through the house, marking the hour in which dreams and memories meet. She rose quietly, carrying the music box in her hands. As she reached the doorway, she glanced back one last time. The attic, bathed in silver light, looked peaceful, as if it had finally exhaled after years of holding its breath. The door closed behind her with a soft click. The music box, now warm from her touch, gave one final chime before falling silent again. Not empty this time, but content, and somewhere deep within the wood and gears, beneath the quiet layers of dust and time, the melody rested, waiting once more for the night when it would be remembered again. The whisper of time. The music box dreamed in the stillness of the attic, where dust floated like sleeping stars. It dreamed of laughter, of small hands and candlelight. Though it had no heart to beat or lungs to sigh, it remembered what warmth had once felt like, the soft hum of bedtime stories, the hush of night wrapping around a child's breath, the flutter of curtains in summer wind. These memories lived in its notes, in the delicate teeth of its brass comb, waiting to be heard again. Downstairs, the old clock struck 12. Its chime rose through the house in slow, deliberate tones, brushing against the walls like the hand of an old friend. With every echo, something seemed to stir, not in sound, but in time. The air shimmered faintly, as though the hours themselves had forgotten how to stay still. The woman, the same one who had found the box earlier that evening, sat on her bed, the music box beside her. The house was quiet now, the kind of quiet that comes after tears and memories have both been released. She had opened the windows to let in the cool night air, and the wind carried the scent of rain-soaked leaves from the orchard beyond. Her notebook lay open beside her, half filled with sketches and words she could barely read. Each page carried fragments of something she was trying to understand, moments that slipped between dream and memory. The box had not played again, but somehow it still seemed alive. Its wooden body held a faint warmth, as though the melody lingered inside, waiting for her to ask it to speak again. She reached out, running her fingers over the lid, tracing the painted girl under the flowering tree. The girl on the lid seemed different now. The moonlight caught her face in such a way that it almost looked as though she was turning just slightly, as if listening. The woman smiled faintly. "Did you wait for me all this time?" she whispered. No answer came, but in the hush that followed, the clock downstairs struck again, one slow, solitary chime. Midnight had deepened. The air in the room thickened, soft and luminous, and for a fleeting moment, she thought she saw the faint shimmer of dust forming shapes, outlines of books, toys, and familiar corners that didn't belong to her bedroom, but to somewhere older. She blinked, and the shimmer was gone. Still, something had changed. The room felt different, not empty, but waiting, like a breath being held before a word is spoken. The lantern on her bedside table flickered, and the shadows along the walls began to shift gently, as if responding to the faint rhythm of the clock below. She picked up the box again, holding it close to her chest. The faint scent of lavender and cedar reached her, a fragrance older than her own lifetime. "Let's see if you still remember," she murmured, and slowly wound the brass key. The mechanism resisted, creaked, then turned. The first note that emerged was soft and trembling, but it carried through the room like a sigh of relief. Then came another, then another, the lullaby, reborn once more. The melody spilled out into the quiet air, a river of sound winding through invisible years as it played. The world seemed to change around her. The shadows along the walls shimmered and folded, the faint outlines of her room blurring into shapes she could not name. The wooden boards beneath her feet felt warmer, the air brighter. She blinked, and suddenly, she was no longer in her room at all. She stood in an old hallway, lit by the gentle glow of candlelight. The air smelled faintly of honey wax and flowers. The wallpaper was patterned with faded vines, and beneath her bare feet, the floor creaked softly. At the far end of the hall, she could hear laughter, the light, ringing laughter of a child. Her heart skipped. She turned the corner. There, in a small sitting room, was the little girl, the same one from the painted lid. She wore the same blue dress, her hair tied with a pale ribbon, her small hands carefully turning the brass key of the music box that sat on the table before her. The melody filled the room, bright and sweet. Her face glowed in the candlelight, not ghostly, not unreal, but alive in the way dreams are alive, fragile, but true in the moment they exist. The woman watched, frozen between awe and disbelief. The child's lips moved as she hummed softly with the tune. She looked so young, so certain, so filled with the quiet joy of simple things. "Careful," a voice called gently from the doorway. A woman, her mother, stepped into the room, carrying a tray with tea and honey biscuits. The scent of warmth followed her. She looked younger, her hair tied back neatly, her eyes tired but kind. The woman watching recognized her instantly. The sight stole her breath away. She wanted to speak, to run forward and hold her, but something deep within her whispered not to move, not to disturb the fragile boundary of this dream. The mother placed the tray down and smiled at the little girl. "Always that tune," she said softly. "You never get tired of it, do you?" The child shook her head. "It's magic," she said with conviction. "When it plays, the room listens." Her mother laughed quietly, smoothing the child's hair. "Then let's hope the house likes its song." The woman's eyes filled with tears. She had forgotten this moment, not just the words, but the warmth. The golden flicker of light against the window pane, the sound of her own voice humming under her mother's. It was a memory lost too long, now alive again before her. The melody continued to play. The candles flickered, the clock in the hall ticked softly, and everything seemed suspended, as though the world itself had decided to pause just for this song. Then, gently, the scene began to fade. The walls dissolved into dust and light. The sound of the child's laughter grew faint, then disappeared altogether, leaving only the faint echo of the tune in her ears. When she opened her eyes, she was back in her room. The music box sat in her lap, its melody ending on a soft, lingering note, but the air around her still shimmered faintly, as if the memory she had witnessed had left its light behind. Her heart ached, not with sorrow, but with the strange beauty of rediscovery. She looked out the open window. The orchard swayed gently in the breeze, moonlight flowing across the leaves like water. Somewhere, an owl called. The hour was past midnight now, and yet time no longer felt linear. The line between dream and memory had become a soft blur, a space where both could coexist. She lay back on her bed, the music box resting on her chest, and closed her eyes. Sleep came slowly, but when it did, it was deep and luminous, and the box, if such a thing could dream, dreamed with her. It remembered the rhythm of her heartbeat against its wooden frame, the echo of her hum aligning with its notes. It remembered the candlelight flickering across its surface decades ago, and the same moonlight now that touched it anew. Time, it realized, was not a straight path, but a circle, endlessly folding, endlessly waiting to be heard. Somewhere between night and dawn, the wind changed. A soft rain began to fall, pattering gently against the windows. The sound mixed with the faint ticking of the pocket watch on her bedside table, creating a rhythm that lulled the entire house into slumber. The walls seemed to sigh, content, as though they too had been waiting to remember. Then, faintly, from within the heart of the music box, something stirred. The melody began again, softer, slower this time, as though sung not to the world, but to itself. It filled the dark with its quiet song, winding through the air until it reached the edges of sleep. And within her dream, she saw the attic again. Only now, it was alive, bright, with morning light. The same toys sat neatly on their shelves. The air smelled of fresh bread and lilacs. She stood there, barefoot, her notebook in hand, watching the girl in the blue dress open the box once more. But this time, the girl looked up. Their eyes met gray-green and filled with quiet wonder. "You came back," the child said softly. The woman knelt beside her. "I never really left." The girl smiled and turned the key. The melody began to play again, and together they listened, one in the past, one in the present, both sharing the same moment that time could not divide. The dream began to fade, but the feeling remained, that time, for all its distance and weight, could still whisper softly enough for hearts to hear each other across its years. When the woman awoke, morning light was spilling through her window. The rain had stopped, leaving the world fresh and clean. Birds sang outside, their notes bright and simple. She sat up slowly, blinking against the brightness. The music box still rested beside her pillow. Its lid was closed, but she could swear it was faintly warm to the touch. She smiled, brushing her fingers across the painted lid. The girl beneath the tree seemed to shine a little brighter in the morning light. Downstairs, the old clock chimed once more, a single soft note. It was the same hour it had been when the lullaby had first returned to life. She rose, carrying the music box to the window. The orchard stretched before her, sunlight painting the grass in gentle gold. Somewhere among the branches, a sparrow sang the same pattern as the lullaby, a few notes, light and clear. She laughed quietly, surprised by the warmth in her chest. "You remembered too," she whispered, as if to the world itself. And as she turned the key once more, the melody rose again, not just a tune now, but a bridge, connecting everything that had been and everything still waiting to be remembered. The sound floated through the open window, across the trees, over the sleeping town, a whisper of time itself, gentle and endless, reminding all that even forgotten songs find their way home. The Visitor of Moonlight. The attic had fallen silent again. Only the whisper of the wind lingered through the half-open window, carrying with it the scent of night-blooming jasmine and the distant song of crickets. Dust drifted lazily in the pale silver glow, settling over the quiet trunks and forgotten shelves. The house slept, every timber, every wall, breathing in slow, steady rhythm, like a creature lost in a deep dream. And yet, within that silence, something stirred. A faint tremor passed through the air, so soft that it might have been the sigh of time itself. The latch of the attic door shivered once, then clicked open. A draft wound its way through the narrow gap, curling around the shelves, lifting a few loose pages into a slow, swirling dance. The moonlight followed, spilling in through the window and gathering like a soft mist on the wooden floorboards. A shape began to take form. It started as a flicker, a ripple of light bending and folding until it shaped itself into something almost human. A small figure stood there, woven entirely of moonlight. Its hair shimmered like silver threads drifting in water. Its eyes, wide and gentle, glowed with the pale blue of a distant dawn. It wore no clothes in the ordinary sense, only light and the faint memory of movement, the way moonbeams wrap themselves around the surface of a lake. The spirit looked around the attic with quiet curiosity, as though reacquainting itself with an old, forgotten home. Its expression was soft, and yet, in its smile, was the sadness of centuries. Its gaze fell upon the shelf where the music box rested for a long while. It stood there, silent. The air around it grew still, almost reverent. Then, with steps so light they left no sound, the spirit approached. It stopped before the shelf and reached out its hand, a hand that glowed faintly, translucent and warm. Its fingers brushed against the lid of the music box. The dust lifted away as though drawn to the light. "You've waited a long time," the spirit whispered. Its voice was neither male nor female, neither young nor old. The spirit closed its eyes, and for a moment, everything in the attic seemed to pause, even the faint creaks and sighs of the wood. Then came the smallest sound, a single, trembling note from within the music box. The spirit smiled faintly. "Ah," it murmured, "you remember." The melody began to rise, slow, uncertain at first, like a dream learning to speak again. The tiny gears inside the box turned as if guided by unseen hands. The music filled the attic, clear and delicate, wrapping around beams and trunks, curling along the rafters. The tune was the same lullaby that had drifted through the house long ago, though now it carried a tone more wistful, more ancient. As the music played, the spirit turned its gaze toward the window. The moon hung large and low, its light spilling through the branches of the old apple trees below. Every leaf shimmered with dew, every petal gleamed like glass. The melody from the box drifted outward through the window, mingling with the night air. Somewhere beyond the orchard, the world listened. The spirit's eyes softened. "They still hear you," it whispered. "Even the stars remember." It lifted its hands, and from its palms, threads of silver light unfurled, delicate as cobwebs. They floated through the air, weaving themselves into ribbons that shimmered in rhythm with the song. Each ribbon carried a faint echo of laughter, children's voices, the rustle of skirts, the gentle hum of someone singing far away. The room filled with fragments of time, fragments of sound, as though the melody had opened a door between then and now. And then footsteps. They were soft, uncertain, coming from below. The attic door creaked again, and the woman stepped inside. She held a lantern, its warm glow trembling against the cool blue light that now filled the room. Her eyes widened. For a moment, she thought the moonlight had somehow become alive. But then she saw it. The spirit turned toward her. Neither spoke at first. The air between them shimmered, heavy with wonder. The woman felt no fear, only the quiet recognition of something she had always known but forgotten how to name. The spirit's light reflected in her eyes, making them seem to glow like water under starlight. "You can see me," the spirit said softly. The woman nodded. I think I've always seen you," she replied. Her voice was steady, though her heart beat fast. "You're from the music box, aren't you?" The spirit tilted its head, smiling gently. Perhaps the box remembered me, just as you did." The woman stepped closer, her lantern flickering. "Who are you?" "I am what remains of a song," the spirit said simply. "A memory that never learned how to fade." It turned its gaze back toward the box, where the melody still played. "When the one who loved this song forgot to listen, I fell asleep. I waited for the day the notes would return." She knelt beside the shelf, her cardigan sleeve brushing the light that surrounded the spirit. The air felt cool and soft, not cold, but filled with a strange kind of tenderness, like touching fog that hums with warmth. "You waited all this time?" she asked. The spirit nodded. "Time is different for songs. We live only when we are heard. Between the notes, we dream." The words hung in the air, delicate and true. The woman reached out, her fingers trembling slightly, and touched the side of the music box. The spirit's light flared gently, as if responding to her touch. Together, they listened. The melody swelled, no longer hesitant but full, a bridge between heartbeats, between worlds. The attic filled with a brightness so soft it seemed woven of memory itself. "I remember this song," the woman whispered. "My mother sang it. My grandmother, too." The spirit's expression brightened, like dawn rising over water. "Then you are part of it," it said. "That's why you could hear me." For a while, they said nothing. They just listened, the mortal and the melody, the living and the remembered. The world beyond the attic fell away until only the music existed, carrying them both into that shimmering space between time and dream. Then the spirit spoke again, softly. "Would you like to see what the song remembers?" The woman hesitated only a moment before nodding. "Yes," she said. The spirit raised its hands once more. The threads of light that had hung in the air began to weave themselves together, spinning into images faint at first, then vivid. The attic around them faded, the air filled with color and warmth. She was standing now in a garden bathed in moonlight. The same flowering tree from the music box lid towered above her, petals drifting through the air like snow. Beneath it stood her younger self, the girl in the blue dress, laughing as she tried to catch the falling blossoms in her hands. Her mother's laughter echoed nearby, and the spirit stood beside her, watching quietly. "This is where your melody was born," it said. "Every note carries a piece of this night." The woman turned slowly, her eyes shining with wonder. The garden felt endless, like a memory made whole again. "I thought it was just a painting," she whispered. "Just a dream." The spirit smiled. "Dreams and memories are neighbors. Sometimes the door between them is made of music." The little girl beneath the tree looked up, as if sensing them. Her eyes, bright, familiar, met the woman's for a moment. She didn't seem frightened. Instead, she smiled, the same small, certain smile she once gave to her mother before bed. The petals drifted faster, the air shimmered. The spirit raised a hand, and slowly the image began to fade. The woman reached out, wanting to hold on to the moment, but her fingers met only moonlight. The next breath she took was filled with dust and silence again. She was back in the attic, kneeling before the shelf. The music box's final notes trembled and faded into stillness. The spirit's light dimmed to a faint glow. "It's fading," she whispered. "All songs must rest," the spirit replied softly. "But they never truly end. They simply wait for someone to remember the next verse." The woman's eyes glistened. "Will I see you again?" The spirit tilted its head, its form growing faint, almost transparent. "You will hear me," it said. "Whenever you listen with your heart instead of your ears." The lantern flame wavered, casting a circle of gold that mingled with the silver of moonlight. The spirit smiled one last time, a smile that felt like a promise, and then it stepped backward into the light. Its body dissolved into 1,000 drifting motes that floated toward the window, scattering into the night sky like stars returning home. The attic was quiet again. Only the faint scent of jasmine lingered, and the soft tick of the pocket watch she had left on the WINDOWSILL dot. The woman sat there for a long time, the music box in her lap, her hands resting gently upon it. She didn't cry this time. The silence that followed was not heavy, but full, alive with meaning. Outside, the moon moved higher, painting the orchard in silver dot. At last, she stood and walked to the window. The wind brushed her hair, cool and sweet. Somewhere in the distance, the world seemed to hum faintly, a tune she recognized but couldn't place. Carried by the breeze, she smiled. "I hear you," she whispered. The moonlight glimmered in answer. She set the music box on the windowsill, its lid slightly open. The night air touched it softly, and for just a heartbeat, one final note played, clear and bright, before fading into the quiet hum of the stars. The woman lingered there, watching the sky. The spirit was gone, but its presence had left something behind, a peace that seemed to hum in every corner of the house. The walls no longer felt empty. The silence was no longer lonely. Downstairs, the old clock struck one gentle, patient, marking time's passage not as loss, but as continuation. And in that moment, both the house and the heart that remembered it breathed together in rhythm with the music that had never truly stopped, only waited. The return of the dreamer. Far away, beneath the quiet sweep of dawn, a woman stirred in her sleep. The window beside her bed was slightly open, letting in the cool whisper of night's last breath. Curtains swayed gently in the breeze, carrying the faint scent of dew and apple blossoms. Somewhere, impossibly distant, yet near enough to touch, a melody floated through the air, soft, fragile, familiar. It was the same tune that had once echoed through her childhood nights, the same song she had wound in a music box beneath the glow of a bedside lamp. Even in dreams, her heart recognized it. Her fingers twitched against the sheets, as though reaching for the little brass key she used to turn so carefully before bed. The melody wove through her slumber, tugging at threads of memory buried deep within her, the laughter of her mother, the warm creak of the house, the shimmer of moonlight against her old attic window, and then, gently, the dream began to take shape. She found herself standing in a vast, mist-filled space. The air shimmered softly, as if made from starlight dissolved in fog. Each breath she took felt weightless, carrying the faint taste of something long remembered. The world around her was quiet, yet alive, the kind of silence that listens in the distance. Faint notes drifted like fireflies through the mist. The melody, it called her name, not with words, but with tone, with the warmth of belonging. She turned toward the sound. There, through the pale haze, she saw a staircase. It wasn't made of wood or stone, but of light itself, every step glowing faintly, pulsing in rhythm with the song. The stairs spiraled upward into the mist, vanishing somewhere beyond sight. Each note of the tune seemed to rise along its steps, inviting her upward. Barefoot, she began to climb. With every step, the air grew clearer, filled with tiny particles of shimmering dust that drifted like memories, fragments of her life. She saw flashes in the light around her, a child's hand turning a music box key, her mother humming beside her, a window filled with moonlight, a notebook resting open on her lap. The melody continued, steady and patient, leading her higher. It wasn't just sound, it was feeling, a thread connecting her through time. When she reached the top of the staircase, the mist parted. Before her stood a door, tall, wooden, and painted a deep blue that seemed to hold the color of twilight itself. Around its frame, tiny silver vines glowed faintly, and above it hung a small brass keyhole shaped like a crescent moon. She could hear the melody clearly now, coming from the other side. Her heart tightened. She knew this door. She had seen it before, in dreams she had forgotten, in drawings she'd once sketched as a child. It was the door to the attic. She reached out and placed her hand upon it. The surface felt warm beneath her palm, as though sunlight had touched it moments ago. She hesitated, breath-catching. Then, with a slow, steady push, she opened it. The door swung inward, and she stepped through. The attic looked almost the same, quiet, full of dust and moonlight. The rafters curved above like gentle arms. The trunks, the books, the shelves, everything sat in its proper place. Yet there was something more here now, something living. The air shimmered faintly, touched with a light that didn't belong entirely to the world of the living or the dream at the center of the room. Upon the old wooden shelf, the music box played. It turned without hands to wind it, its brass key moving on its own in slow, patient circles. The melody filled the space like silver water flowing through the dark, and beside it stood a faint glow, the figure of the moonlight spirit. The woman stopped, her breath caught between wonder and peace. "You," she whispered softly. The spirit turned, smiling in recognition. "You came back. I followed the song," she said. "It called to me." The spirit nodded. "It has been calling for many nights. You are the dreamer it waited for." The woman stepped closer, her bare feet silent on the wooden floor. The air seemed to hum with every movement. "Why me?" she asked softly. The spirit's eyes shimmered like the reflection of stars on water. "Because the song belongs to you, and you belong to it. Every melody needs a listener to become real. You dreamed it first, long ago, when you believed songs could open doors." The woman smiled faintly, her eyes glistening. "I did believe that, and you were right," the spirit whispered. "You opened one tonight." The melody swelled gently, surrounding them both in a soft radiance. The attic shifted, its shadows replaced by the golden tones of memory. For an instant, the shelves were no longer dusty, and the air smelled of lilac and old books, just as it once had. The window glowed with moonlight, and the faint echo of laughter, her own younger voice, floated through the air. "It's like the house remembers," she said. Looking around, "It does," replied the spirit. "Houses remember everything they shelter. So do hearts." The woman crossed to the window. The orchard outside gleamed under the moon, its branches glistening with dew. She could see the faint outline of a swing swaying gently in the breeze. The same one her father had built when she was small. Every sound, every scent, every shimmer of light carried the pulse of memory, real and dream woven into one. She turned back to the spirit. "Is this real?" she asked. "Or am I still dreaming?" The spirit smiled. "What is a dream but a memory trying to be remembered? What is memory but a dream that refuses to fade?" She let the words sink in, their truth settling deep. Then, as she watched, the spirit extended its hand toward the music box. "Would you like to see what lies beyond the song?" Slowly, she nodded. The spirit touched the brass key. The melody changed. It deepened, grew softer, warmer, no longer the lullaby of childhood, but something richer, older. The attic around them began to dissolve, replaced by vast fields of starlight and drifting clouds. They stood together in a space that was neither sky nor earth, surrounded by thousands of faint, glowing threads, stretching endlessly in every direction. Each thread pulsed gently, releasing a faint sound, one note, one whisper, one moment of memory. Together, they formed a symphony of lives, of voices, of the world remembering itself through song. The woman's eyes filled with tears. "It's beautiful," she breathed. "This is where all melodies go when they're forgotten," said the spirit. "They wait here in silence until someone remembers them again. You've brought this one home." She reached out and brushed one of the threads with her fingertips. A warmth flooded her, the memory of her mother's voice singing the lullaby beside her bed. Another thread glowed, and she saw her grandmother's hands winding the music box by candlelight. Each one held a life, a love, a piece of time. The spirit watched her quietly. "Every song is a bridge," it said. "You built this one when you dreamed as a child. It's been waiting ever since." The woman looked down, and what happens now? The spirit tilted its head. "Now you wake and carry the song with you. Songs do not belong only to the past. They become whole when they are sung again." The world around them began to fade, the stars dimming, the threads of light dissolving back into mist. The melody slowed, softening into silence. The woman felt herself falling gently, like a leaf descending through air. The spirit's voice followed her, warm and distant. "When you wake, listen. The world hums softly beneath everything, the same song, always waiting. Keep it alive." And then the light was gone. She awoke with the morning sun spilling through her curtains. The room was warm and quiet, bathed in golden light. For a moment, she lay still, her mind caught between sleep and waking. The dream clung to her like a lingering fragrance, faint notes of a melody she could still almost hear. Slowly, she sat up. The music box rested on her bedside table. Its lid was closed, but a faint warmth pulsed from within, as though it had been playing only moments before. She smiled softly, knowingly, and lifted the lid. No sound came, but she didn't need it to. The melody lived in her now, steady and certain, threading through her thoughts like breath. She closed her eyes and began to hum the same lullaby, her voice fragile but sure. The tune filled the morning light, rising gently through the air, curling into the corners of the quiet house downstairs. The old clock ticked in rhythm. Outside, the orchard shimmered with sunlit dew, and the wind carried her voice beyond the open window, a continuation, a promise, and far above, in the fading blue of the dawn sky, something shimmered faintly, a shape woven of light, watching from between clouds. The spirit smiled, its form flickering with the brightness of morning. It listened as she sang, and then turned its gaze upward, toward the last lingering moon. The song was alive again. It drifted beyond the house, over the trees, through the hills and valleys where forgotten echoes slept. And as it moved, the world seemed to breathe in time with it, a slow, peaceful rhythm, like the earth remembering its own heart. The woman finished her song and opened her eyes. The air was still. The music box sat silent, the brass key gleaming faintly. She ran her hand over its lid, tracing the figure of the girl beneath the flowering tree. The paint seemed brighter now, the colors restored. Even the petals in the picture seemed to flutter faintly, caught in an invisible breeze. She placed the box gently back upon the shelf beside her notebook. Then, picking up her pen, she began to write, not words exactly, but fragments of the dream, pieces of melody written as notes and sketches, trying to capture what could not be fully spoken. The morning passed quietly. The light in the room shifted from gold to white. And through it all, she could still hear the faint whisper of the spirit's voice in her memory. Songs do not die, they wait for dreamers. She smiled to herself and wrote one final line beneath her notes, a promise. Simple and sure, the dream continues every time the melody is heard. The reunion song. The morning had long since faded into evening when she returned to the attic. The light that crept up the stairs was a dusky gold, gentle and quiet, carrying with it the scent of rain on rooftops. Dust motes drifted lazily in the air, spinning in circles like tiny galaxies. Each step creaked softly beneath her feet, the old wood remembering her weight, the rhythm of her return. When she reached the top, the door waited slightly ajar, as though expecting her. A soft glow spilled out through the crack, not bright, not blinding, but warm, like candlelight resting inside a seashell. She hesitated for only a heartbeat, then pushed it open. The attic greeted her with a hush that felt almost alive. The air shimmered faintly, trembling with the breath of unseen music. There, on the familiar shelf beneath the slanted window, the music box, its once dull brass, had deepened into a honey-colored shine, and faint patterns of light rippled over its surface like reflections on still water. Beside it stood the moonlight spirit, its shape calm and radiant, as if woven entirely from the silver of the stars. "You came back," the spirit whispered, voice like a wind through chimes. "I couldn't stay away," she replied. "The song never left me." The spirit's smile was quiet, the kind that felt like dawn after a long night. It waited, it said simply, "It always does." She stepped closer. The room smelled faintly of cedar and thyme, of dreams folded away in corners. Her hand hovered over the box, her fingers trembling just slightly. "It feels alive," she murmured. "It is," said the spirit. "It remembers you." The woman's reflection shimmered faintly on the polished lid. Not the face she saw in mirrors, but a softer one, touched by wonder, carrying both youth and years. She reached for the tiny brass key and turned it slowly. It moved with a weightless grace, as if the mechanism itself recognized her touch. The first notes spilled out like drops of clear rain. They filled the attic gently, drifting through beams of moonlight that had begun to gather at the window. The melody unfurled like a story remembered, each note glowing brighter than the last. The dust in the air turned to starlight, swirling around her in patterns too delicate for words. She closed her eyes, the song wrapped around her like a soft blanket, warm, tender, achingly familiar. In that moment, the world seemed to breathe with her. The walls pulsed faintly, as if the house itself had joined in the listening. Shadows softened, corners brightened, and somewhere deep within the song, Other voices began to hum faint echoes of laughter, whispers of her mother's lullaby. The sigh of the wind that used to slip through the orchard trees. "Do you hear it?" it asked softly. "Yes," she whispered. "Everyone's here." The melody rose, gentle but sure, carrying a golden undertone that glowed through the floorboards. The air thickened with warmth, not heavy, but whole, like sunlight underwater. The attic began to change around them. The shelves straightened, the books lost their dust, the wooden beams gleamed as though polished by time's own hands. It was as if the song itself remembered what the attic once was and chose to make it so again. The woman turned slowly. Behind her stood the faint outlines of shapes, people, moments, memories, all formed from the luminous threads of the melody. There was the little girl she had once been, sitting cross-legged on the rug, eyes wide with wonder as she listened to the box. There was her mother, smiling softly, humming along. Even the old cat that used to curl on the windowsill flickered into view, tail twitching lazily in light. Tears welled in her eyes. "I thought they were gone," she whispered. "They were never gone," said the spirit. "They were waiting in the song, waiting for you to listen." She smiled through her tears, the sound of her breath catching in time with the melody. The child version of herself turned toward her, their eyes meeting for a heartbeat. They were the same person, two mirrors facing one another through the glass of time. The child reached out a small hand. The woman knelt, taking it gently. The warmth was real. The music swelled, sweet and shimmering, and the spirit's light grew to fill every corner of the attic. "This is the reunion," the spirit whispered. The song was never meant to be played alone. The woman looked around. Every note seemed to carry a heartbeat, every echo a breath. The attic was no longer simply a room. It had become a gathering, a meeting place of everything that had ever been loved here. Through the open window, the stars leaned closer. Their light spilled inward in rivers of silver and blue, as though the sky itself wished to listen. Outside, the orchard glowed faintly. The trees rustled, their leaves catching bits of the melody and scattering it like pollen into the night. She turned back to the music box. "It's beautiful," she whispered, "but it feels like it's saying goodbye." The spirit tilted its head. "Not goodbye," it said, "a return. Every ending is only a note, waiting for the next measure." The woman nodded, though her eyes glistened. She felt something shift within her, not sadness, but a soft fullness, a kind of peace she hadn't known she was missing. The melody climbed higher, brighter. The air trembled with its strength. Then, all at once, the world held its breath for one long, perfect moment. Everything stopped, the spinning of the key, the flicker of the stars, even the beating of her heart. The attic stood suspended in light. Time itself listened, and in that stillness, she heard it, the heart of the song. A single note that contained everything: love, memory, loss, and return. It was the sound of her mother's voice, her own laughter, the creak of the house, the whisper of the wind. It was life itself. Then the moment passed. The melody softened, curling downward like the slow fall of a feather. The light dimmed gently, returning to its warm, golden glow. The child vanished, smiling. The echoes faded back into silence. The spirit's light, too, began to dim. "Will I see you again?" she asked, softly. The spirit smiled, a crescent of light. "You will hear me. Every time you listen, truly listen, I'll be there. I am part of the melody now, and the melody is part of you. The woman stepped forward, her heart swelling. "Thank you," she whispered, "for keeping it alive." The spirit bowed its head. "Thank you for returning to it." Its light began to scatter, dissolving into tiny motes that rose through the attic air and out the open window, blending with the stars. The room dimmed slowly until only the soft glow of the music box remained. The final notes lingered, delicate as breath. The woman sat beside the shelf, hands folded in her lap, eyes closed. The night was silent now, but she could still feel the hum of the melody beneath everything in the wood of the floor. The air she breathed, the rhythm of her heart. Minutes passed, maybe hours. Time had lost meaning here. When the key finally stopped turning, she opened her eyes. The attic had returned to stillness, but not emptiness. The air felt fuller somehow, more alive. A faint shimmer lingered around the edges of things, as if the world itself remembered the light that had just been. She reached for the music box once more, tracing her fingers over its lid. The painted scene had changed slightly. Where once there had been only a flowering tree, now two figures sat beneath it, a woman and a child. Their faces turned toward one another, listening to the wind. "Reunion," she whispered. The clock downstairs chimed softly, once, twice, thrice. Each note echoed in her bones. She stood, brushed the dust from her dress, and looked around the attic one last time. Everything felt complete as she turned to leave. A gentle breeze drifted through the open window. It carried the faintest trace of melody, just a handful of notes, as if the spirit had left one final gift behind. She paused, listening, and then smiled. "Until next time," she whispered. The door closed quietly behind her. Down the stairs she went, each step echoing softly. The house felt warmer now, the air lighter. On the walls hung photographs she had nearly forgotten, moments of laughter, of sunlight, of love. The melody seemed to linger in them too. When she reached the living room, she opened the windows wide. Outside, the night glowed with stars. The wind stirred gently through the orchard, carrying with it the faint hum of crickets and faraway music, breathing it all in. Then she whispered, almost to herself, "It's all still here." The stars seemed to flicker in reply, and somewhere far above, beyond the clouds and beyond the reach of time, the spirit listened. Its voice joined the melody once more, now endless and whole, singing softly into the universe. The woman closed her eyes, hearing it not with her ears but with her heart. And as the last light of the attic's glow faded into the horizon, the song continued unseen, unwound, yet forever turning. The reunion was complete. The melody had found its home. The melody of rest. The house was quiet again. The last of the night's music had faded into silence, leaving behind only the soft ticking of the old clock downstairs and the sigh of the wind brushing past the window panes. The moon lingered above the orchard, low and pale, its light spilling gently through the half-open attic door. The woman stood for a long while, gazing at the music box on the shelf. Its glow had dimmed now, reduced to a soft, golden pulse, like the last ember of a candle. She traced her fingers across its lid one final time, feeling the warmth still lingering in the metal, the warmth of memory, of love, of 1,000 nights that would never truly fade. The spirit stood nearby, its form faint and shimmering. It no longer glowed with the brilliance of before. Instead, its light was calm, softened into the gentle silver of moonlight upon water. The two of them stood together in silence, the dreamer and the guardian of song. "It's beautiful," the woman whispered, "and quiet now." "Yes," said the spirit. Its voice was softer than ever, the edges of it dissolving into the air. "Its waiting is done." She smiled, her heart full and light. "So is mine." The spirit nodded. "Then it is time. Time for what?" "For rest," it said, its voice like a lullaby's final note. She looked down at the box again. Will it ever play again? The spirit's light flickered gently, a quiet rhythm in the shadows. "Songs never die," it said. "They simply sleep. When someone remembers, truly remembers, the melody will wake. Perhaps not in this form, perhaps not even in this place, but the song will live. It always finds a way." Her eyes softened. "Then it will never be forgotten." The spirit smiled. "No, dreamer, you have ensured that." The woman placed both hands on the lid, and slowly, reverently, she closed it. The click of brass against wood sounded soft, final, and full of peace. The glow around the music box faded until only the moonlight remained for a heartbeat. The attic was utterly still. Then, as if in gratitude, a faint breeze stirred through the rafters. It brushed against the woman's hair, carrying the scent of cedar and starlight. The spirit's shape wavered, thinning, the silver threads of its being beginning to unwind. She looked up quickly. "You're leaving." The spirit bowed its head. "My song has been sung. My purpose is fulfilled. The melody has found its listener again. Now, it is time for me to return to the quiet between songs." Her throat tightened. "Will I see you again?" The spirit lifted its gaze, eyes gleaming like the reflection of stars in water. "You already do. Every time the moonlight touches a note, every time the world falls silent enough to listen, I am there. I will always be there." The woman smiled faintly, blinking away tears that weren't quite sorrow. "Thank you," she whispered. "And thank you," said the spirit, "for remembering." It took one last step toward the window where the moonlight fell strongest. The glow of its form mingled with the pale silver light, becoming indistinguishable from it. The air shimmered, trembled, and then, softly, soundlessly, the spirit dissolved into the moonbeam, scattering like fine dust across the night. The woman stood there for a moment, her heart still echoing with the warmth of its voice. Then she turned back to the music box. The air felt lighter now, not empty, but peaceful, like the sigh of a story that has finally been told. She lowered herself to the floor beside the shelf and sat quietly, her back against the old wooden beams. Through the small window above, she could see the stars, countless and calm, listening as they always had. She closed her eyes and breathed deeply, letting the stillness fill her. Below the house slept. The orchard swayed softly in the wind. The world seemed to hum, not with music, not with sound, but with presence. When she finally rose, the first hint of dawn was beginning to color the edge of the sky. She left the attic door open as she descended the stairs, letting the cool light spill down behind her. The house creaked gently, the sound almost like a sigh of relief. In the hallway, she paused, glancing at the photographs lining the walls, her mother's face, her father's smile, the little girl she used to be. The frames caught the faint moonlight, and for a moment they glimmered, as though the people inside were glowing from within. She smiled and continued on in her bedroom. She pulled the curtains wide, allowing the last of the night to slip in. The silver light touched the edge of her pillow, the wooden frame of her bed, the open notebook still lying on the desk. She brushed her fingers across its pages. The final lines she had written earlier that day shimmered faintly in the moonlight. The dream continues every time the melody is heard. She closed the notebook gently, the words complete. Then she lay down. The sheets were cool, soft, and welcoming. She could still feel the melody in her chest, pulsing quietly in rhythm with her heartbeat. It wasn't loud, no longer the vivid tune of her dreams, but something deeper, subtler, like a secret the world had decided to keep with her. Her eyes drifted closed. The wind outside rustled the orchard leaves, carrying the faintest echo of the song, not played, not sung, just remembered. The clock ticked softly in the hall. Each beat seemed to hum in tune. The woman smiled in her sleep. The melody wrapped around her like a blanket of light, a lullaby that didn't need words. It moved through her, through breath, through thought, through dream, and out into the quiet night. The spirit's promise lingered there, invisible but real. Every time the world falls silent enough to listen, I am there. The stars outside flickered gently, and one by one, they began to fade into the blue of morning as the first rays of sunlight touched the horizon. The attic stirred again. The music box sat quietly upon its shelf. The dust, once thick, now shimmered faintly in the light. The brass hinge caught the dawn and gleamed softly. It looked at peace, not waiting anymore, not longing, simply resting. And then, in that hush between night and day, something subtle happened. The smallest sound, not a note, not even a tone, whispered from within the box. It wasn't a melody this time, but a sigh, light, contented, like the breath of someone smiling in their sleep. The attic listened. The rafters creaked. The window trembled faintly in the morning. Breeze. Then stillness again, but not the stillness of loneliness. This stillness was whole, the quiet of completion, the silence that follows the final note of a song perfectly played. And if one listened closely, very closely, the air still carried the faint hum of the melody that once was a resonance so soft it could easily be mistaken for the heartbeat of the house itself. Outside, the day unfurled. The orchard swayed in gold and green. Dew glittered on every leaf. The swing creaked gently in the wind, the same rhythm it had kept for years. A bird sang somewhere far off, just a few notes that almost echoed the lullaby's opening line. The house breathed, the world turned, and the melody, though silent, lived on in everything it had touched. Downstairs, the woman slept peacefully. Her dreams were soft and untroubled, filled not with visions, but with warmth, the kind that stays, that settles deep in the heart and never leaves in her dream. She sat once more beneath the flowering tree painted on the music box lid. The air was clear, the grass cool beneath her hands. The spirit sat beside her, quiet, smiling. its form made of sunlight this time, not moonlight. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Somewhere, unseen, a faint breeze played through the branches, and the petals fell in slow spirals around them. A single note drifted through the air, then another, then a few more. The melody was softer now, content, as if humming to itself. The woman smiled, and in that dream, as in waking life, the music box smiled too, not with lips, not with form, but through the light that surrounded it, through the peace that filled the air around its still heart. It had waited, it had remembered, it had sung, and now it could rest. And now, the music box rests. The melody lingers in your heart. Good night, dreamer.